My wife flirted with him like I was nothing, so I walked out silently. The string lights cast a warm glow across the venue I'd spent weeks perfecting. The Westfield Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland for Meridian Solutions' annual holiday party. Crystal snowflakes hung from the ceiling, catching the light in prismatic displays while soft jazz played beneath the hum of conversation. Every detail had been meticulously arranged, from the hand-selected wine list to the live band that would start playing after dinner. None of this was in my official job description as operations manager, but I'd taken personal ownership of the event anyway. I watched from near the bar as my colleagues filtered in, their faces brightening as they took in the atmosphere. Small victories like these kept me going these days, the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful that others enjoyed, even if they didn't know who was responsible. "Josh, this is incredible," Melissa from accounting said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. "You really outdid yourself this year." I smiled, genuinely appreciative. "Thanks. Just wanted everyone to have a good time." "Well, mission accomplished. Though your wife doesn't seem too impressed." My gaze drifted across the room to where Claire stood. 5 years of marriage, and still the sight of her could stop my breath, her dark hair falling in loose waves over bare shoulders, the midnight blue dress hugging curves I knew by heart. But tonight, like most nights lately, she seemed completely disconnected from me, from us. "She's just getting acclimated," I offered weakly. Melissa gave me a sympathetic look before being pulled away by her husband. Claire had barely spoken during the drive over. When I'd mentioned how many hours went into planning the event, she'd merely nodded and continued scrolling through her phone. Now she stood alone, surveying the room with the detached interest of someone forced to attend a stranger's wedding. I crossed the floor, navigating through clusters of colleagues, many of whom nodded respectfully as I passed. Claire saw me approaching and took a deliberate sip of her champagne. "Having fun?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "It's fine," she replied, her eyes continuing to scan the room. "Your coworkers are nice." "They're your coworkers too, in a way," I said. "You've met most of them at previous events." Claire shrugged. "I can never keep them straight. They all blend together after a while." Her words stung more than they should have. These people were important to me, even if she didn't know the full extent of my connection to them. Before I could respond, her posture shifted. She straightened, her expression suddenly animated as her eyes fixed on someone, across the room. "Who's that?" she asked, a new lilt in her voice. I followed her gaze to where Ryan Lawson stood chatting with 2 members of the marketing team. 22 years old, fresh out of Stanford with an MBA and enough charm to disarm even the most cynical executives. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored. "That's Ryan. The new intern I mentioned last week." "You didn't mention he looked like that," Claire said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Something cold settled in my stomach. "Like what?" "You know, ambitious. Confident." She turned to me, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Introduce us." I hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Sure." We made our way across the room. Ryan noticed our approach and excused himself from his conversation, extending his hand first to me. "Josh, great party. Everything looks amazing." "Thanks, Ryan. I'd like you to meet my wife, Claire." Ryan turned that 1,000-watt smile toward Claire, who was suddenly radiating warmth and interest. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Reed. Josh talks about you all the time." Claire laughed, a sound I'd nearly forgotten, and placed her hand on Ryan's forearm briefly. "All good things, I hope. And please call me Claire." "Of course, Claire." Ryan held her gaze a beat longer than necessary. "Your husband's been an incredible mentor since I started. The whole team respects him enormously." She raised an eyebrow. "Really? Josh, the mentor?" She glanced at me, something dismissive in her expression. "That's surprising." I felt my face grow warm. "I just try to help where I can." "Josh is being modest," Ryan said. He's got a reputation for spotting potential in people that others miss. Claire's laugh this time had a sharp edge. That must be new. At home, he barely notices when I change my hair. Ryan's smile faltered slightly, his eyes darting between us. How are you finding the corporate world after grad school? I asked, desperate to change the subject. Challenging in the best ways, Ryan answered. There's so much to learn, but I'm eager to make my mark. I bet you are, Claire said, her voice taking on a honeyed quality I hadn't heard in years. Ambition is such an attractive quality. I shifted uncomfortably, suddenly feeling like a third wheel in my own marriage. You remind me of Josh when we first met, she continued, though her eyes never left Ryan's face. He was climbing the corporate ladder then, full of ideas and energy. Weren't you, honey? I still have ideas, I said quietly. Claire turned to me with a look that felt like she was seeing a stain on an otherwise pristine tablecloth. Of course you do. They're just more realistic now. She turned back to Ryan. Tell me about your plans. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? As Ryan launched into his carefully rehearsed career aspirations, I watched my wife transform. She laughed at his jokes, leaned in when he spoke, touched his arm to emphasize points. She asked thoughtful follow-up questions about his goals and strategies, questions she hadn't bothered to ask me in months. That's impressive, she said when he finished. You're going places, I can tell. I hope so, Ryan replied, glancing at me with what looked like genuine discomfort. You will, Claire assured him, then turned to me with a smirk. You used to be like him, remember? Full of energy. Not so stale. The word hung in the air between us. Stale. Like bread left too long on the counter. Forgotten. Useless. Ryan cleared his throat. I should probably mingle a bit more. It was truly lovely meeting you, Claire. He shook my hand firmly. Thanks again for everything, Josh. As he walked away, Claire's eyes followed him. Now that's the kind of person who's going somewhere in life. I swallowed hard, tasting bitterness. I need to check on the catering. Excuse me? She barely nodded, already scanning the room for Ryan's location. I made my way toward the kitchen, nodding mechanically at coworkers who complimented the event. Inside, I was crumbling. Claire's behavior wasn't new, her coldness, her distance, but tonight was different. Tonight, she made it painfully clear that it wasn't just that she'd fallen out of love with me. She didn't respect me anymore. What she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that this average job she so casually dismissed was more than it appeared. Much more. And Ryan, the ambitious intern she was so taken with, was part of a plan she couldn't begin to understand. As I pushed through the kitchen doors, away from the party and my wife's cutting remarks, I took a deep breath. Phase 1 was complete, painful as it was. Now it was time for the next step. The drive home from the party was silent. Claire stared out the passenger window, her face illuminated by the occasional streetlight, highlighting a slight smile that hadn't been there in months, not for me, anyway. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles whitening as I navigated the empty streets. Ryan seems nice, she finally said, breaking the silence but not turning to look at me. He's hardworking, I replied evenly, keeping my eyes on the road. Ambitious too. He's got that hunger, you know? She turned slightly toward me. That drive that makes someone special. I nodded, swallowing the retort rising in my throat. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Our house was dark when we pulled into the driveway, a modern 3-story nestled in an upscale neighborhood. Nice, but intentionally not what I could actually afford. When we'd first heard it 5 years ago, Claire had squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's perfect. We can grow into it." Now it felt like a stage set for a marriage that was increasingly performative. "I'm going to take a shower," Claire announced as soon as we entered, already slipping off her heels. "It's late. Want some tea first?" I offered, a small olive branch. She paused at the foot of the stairs. "No. I'm tired." Her expression softened slightly, perhaps from guilt. Maybe tomorrow we could talk? It's been a while since we really talked. Hope flickered briefly. I'd like that. But tomorrow never came. It never did anymore. The next morning, Claire was gone before I woke, a hastily scribbled note on the counter about meeting friends for brunch. Our scheduled talk forgotten, or more likely, never intended. This was our pattern now, ships passing in the night, sharing space but little else. When had it started? 6 months ago? A year? The descent had been so gradual that I couldn't pinpoint when exactly we'd stopped being partners and become polite strangers who occasionally shared a bed. I made coffee and sat at our kitchen island, opening my laptop to review some confidential company reports. Being Operations Manager Josh, at home maintained my cover, even when no one was watching. Habit, perhaps, or a safeguard against slipping up. Only a handful of people knew the truth, that I wasn't just an employee of Meridian Solutions. I was Joshua Reed, founder and CEO. I'd built the company from nothing 7 years ago, before Claire and I met. After my first venture failed spectacularly and publicly, I decided to do things differently this time. No press releases with my face plastered everywhere. No high-profile interviews. Just quiet, steady growth built on solid business decisions rather than a cult of personality. When I met Claire, she was working at a boutique marketing firm, dazzling clients with her creativity and charisma. She fell in love with Josh Reed, rising operations specialist, not knowing she was dating the owner of a rapidly expanding tech consultancy. I meant to tell her eventually. Then we got engaged, and it seemed like it would overshadow our relationship. Then we got married, and I worried she'd think I'd been lying to her all along. Now I wondered if the truth would have changed anything. Would she respect me more if she knew? Or would she have only been attracted to the status, not the man? My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Meeting confirmed with Henderson Group. Documents ready for your review in secure folder. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Ryan wasn't just any intern. He was my eyes and ears, carefully selected to help me evaluate certain members of my leadership team who I suspected of undermining company initiatives. His youth and apparent inexperience made him invisible to those with something to hide. No one guarded their words around the eager intern. I hadn't expected Claire to be part of the equation. But her reaction to him last night revealed something I'd been avoiding. The fundamental fracture in our marriage went beyond busy schedules or miscommunication. It was about who she thought I was, and who she wished I would be. The evidence was everywhere once I allowed myself to see it. Her casual dismissals of my career. Her subtle comparisons to friends more successful husbands. The barely concealed boredom when I discussed work challenges. It's just an operations job, Josh, she'd said last month when I mentioned a complex problem I was solving. It's not like you're changing the world. If she only knew that the boring workflow integration I'd designed was now being implemented in hospitals across the country, saving countless hours of administrative time that could be redirected to patient care. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at our manicured backyard. The garden Claire had once tended with care now maintained by a service she'd insisted we needed. Everything in our life together was like that garden now, technically alive but lacking personal attention, existing on momentum rather than love. The realization settled heavily. My wife didn't just fall out of love with me. She didn't respect me anymore. And I had a decision to make about where we went from here. 3 weeks before the holiday party, I sat across from Ryan Lawson in my private office, a space few at Meridian Solutions even knew existed. Unlike the open-concept workspace where Operations Manager Josh had a modest desk, this 30th floor corner office with its panoramic city views befitted the CEO I actually was. So let me get this straight, Ryan said, leaning forward in his chair. You want me to pose as an entry-level intern while actually conducting confidential evaluations of your executive team? I nodded, studying his reaction. Ryan had come highly recommended by my former mentor at Stanford, who described him as brilliantly perceptive and unwaveringly ethical, exactly what I needed. I have reason to believe someone on my leadership team is sabotaging key initiatives, I explained. Traditional investigations have turned up nothing, which means whoever it is knows how to cover their tracks. And you think they'll let their guard down around me? People rarely filter themselves around interns. You'll be invisible in the best possible way. Ryan considered this, his analytical mind visibly processing the scenario. But why the secrecy about your position? Why does everyone think you're just an operations manager? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly over the years. When I started Meridian, I wanted to build something based on merit, not personality, I said. My first company failed because I was too focused on being the face of the brand instead of strengthening its foundation. This time, I wanted decisions to be evaluated on their quality, not on who made them. I didn't mention the personal reasons, how refreshing it was to know people respected my ideas without the influence of my title, how liberating to walk through life without the weight of others' expectations. Only 5 people in the company know my real position, I continued. My CFO, my assistant, legal counsel, the head of security, and now you. Ryan nodded slowly. What exactly would you need me to do? I slid a tablet across the desk. Observe. Report. Get close to the leadership team. They have access to information about our upcoming acquisition of Westfield Tech, information that somehow keeps leaking to competitors. And what about your personal life? Ryan asked carefully. Does your wife know? The question caught me off guard. No. Claire thinks I'm exactly what it says on my business card. That's a significant secret to keep from a spouse, he said, not judgmentally but with genuine curiosity. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of years of omission. It is. It started as timing, never finding the right moment, and evolved into something more complicated. I sighed. In some ways, I wanted her to love me for me, not for what I built. Ryan seemed to understand. And now? Now I'm not sure it would matter. The admission stung as I spoke it aloud. Our marriage has been struggling. Claire seems dissatisfied with who I am. I'm sorry to hear that. It is what it is, I said, straightening. But that's not relevant to what I'm asking you to do. Ryan studied me for a moment. With all due respect, sir, if I'm infiltrating your company culture, everything about your situation is relevant. Including your marriage. His directness was refreshing. Most employees would have awkwardly changed the subject. Fair point, I conceded. Claire will likely be at company events. She may interact with you. Just be yourself. Professional, of course. What I couldn't articulate then, what I barely admitted to myself, was that part of me wanted to see how Claire behaved around someone she perceived as ambitious and powerful. Would she be drawn to Ryan the way she once had been to me? Would it confirm what I feared, that her dissatisfaction wasn't with me as a person but with what she believed I had failed to become? I understand, Ryan said, extending his hand. I accept the assignment. The following weeks unfolded according to plan. Ryan integrated seamlessly into Meridian, his earnest demeanor and quick intellect earning him access to meetings and conversations typically closed to newcomers. His reports were detailed and insightful, already narrowing our list of potential saboteurs. What I hadn't planned for was Claire's reaction to him at the holiday party. The way she lit up. The animation in her voice. The casual cruelty in her comparison between him and me. 2 days after the party, Ryan requested an urgent meeting. He arrived at my hidden office looking uncomfortable, his usual confidence dimmed. I need to discuss something sensitive, he began after ensuring the door was closed. About the investigation? About your wife. My stomach tightened. Go on. She's been texting me. Nothing inappropriate, he quickly clarified. But persistent. Coffee invitations. Questions about my background. She mentioned wanting to pick my brain about career advancement for a friend. He slid his phone across the desk, displaying the message thread. I haven't responded, he said. I wanted direction from you first. I stared at the screen, reading Claire's messages, friendly, curious, laced with subtle compliments, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just casual interest. This was pursuit. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said finally, sliding the phone back. "Your loyalty is noted and appreciated. What would you like me to do?" I considered my options carefully. Engage minimally. Be professional but not encouraging. And keep me informed. Ryan nodded, clearly relieved. "Of course." As he left, I turned to the window, watching the city below as evening lights began to shimmer against the darkening sky. The pieces were falling into place, but not in the way I had anticipated. It was time to accelerate my plans. 1 week after the holiday party, Meridian Solutions hosted a smaller gathering, a celebration for securing the Henderson contract, a deal that would expand our client base by 30%. The executive team had worked tirelessly for months to make it happen, though they had no idea that several key strategic decisions had come directly from me rather than the figurehead CEO who made rare appearances at headquarters. The celebration was held in our company's rooftop lounge, an intimate space with low lighting and comfortable seating arrangements. Unlike the holiday party, this was exclusive. Only those who had worked on the project and their plus ones. I'd invited Claire more out of habit than hope. To my surprise, she accepted enthusiastically. "You're actually coming?" I asked as she emerged from our bedroom wearing a fitted red dress I'd never seen before. "Of course." She smiled, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "You said Ryan would be there, right? Since he helped with some research?" The question landed like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. "Yes, the whole team will be there." "Then I wouldn't miss it." She grabbed her coat and headed for the door, leaving me to follow in her wake, the scent of her new perfume lingering in the air. At the event, Claire was transformed from the disinterested wife I'd grown accustomed to. She worked the room with practiced charm, laughing at executives' jokes, asking thoughtful questions about the Henderson deal. Anyone watching would have thought she was the supportive spouse of a rising corporate star. But I noticed her eyes constantly scanning the crowd, her attention shifting whenever the door opened. Waiting for Ryan. He arrived 40 minutes into the evening, looking polished yet appropriately deferential for his supposed position. Claire's face lit up instantly, her entire body language changing as she tracked his movement across the room. I was engaged in conversation with Diane from legal when I felt Claire's hand on my arm. "Josh, have you seen how well Ryan is handling himself? He's working the room like he's been doing this for years." I glanced over to where Ryan stood chatting with our VP of sales. "He's certainly confident." "That's an understatement," Claire said, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from those nearby. "He has presence. Not everyone can command a room like that." Her implication hung in the air. Diane shot me a sympathetic look before excusing herself. "I'm going to see if he wants a drink," Claire announced, already moving away. I watched as she approached Ryan, touching his arm as she spoke. He smiled politely, maintaining professional distance even as Claire stepped closer. To his credit, he kept glancing in my direction, his discomfort evident. Throughout the evening, Claire found reasons to be near Ryan. She laughed too loudly at his comments, stood too close, touched his arm or shoulder to emphasize points. All while casting occasional glances my way, as if to ensure I was witnessing her fascination with him. The breaking point came during a toast. Our VP of Marketing raised a glass to the team's success, calling out key contributors. When he mentioned Ryan's research that had identified crucial market opportunities, Claire seized the moment. "To Ryan," she said, raising her glass higher. "The future of Meridian." A few people nodded in agreement. "Some people peak in their 30s, she continued, her eyes drifting deliberately to me. "Others just coast." An uncomfortable silence descended. A few nervous chuckles broke out. Ryan's face flushed with embarrassment. Time seemed to slow as I processed what had just happened. My wife had publicly humiliated me, not just as her husband, but in front of my own employees. People who had no idea they were actually witnessing their CEO being ridiculed. I looked at Claire, really looked at her. The cruel satisfaction in her eyes. The slight lift of her chin. The complete absence of the woman I had fallen in love with. In that moment, everything crystallized. This marriage wasn't just failing, it was corroding us both, turning her bitter and me into someone I didn't recognize. I didn't react with anger. I didn't create a scene. Instead, I smiled politely, the calm, measured smile I'd perfected over years of business negotiations. I handed my half-empty glass to a passing server, straightened my jacket, and simply walked out. No dramatic declaration. No slamming doors. Just the quiet dignity of removing myself from a situation that no longer served either of us. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I pulled out my phone and sent 2 messages. The first to my attorney, Initiate Protocol Omega. Tomorrow morning. The second to Ryan, office meeting 9 a.m. Bring all Henderson materials. Include Claire in the invite. I stepped out into the cool night air, taking my first deep breath in what felt like years. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, the silence of my exit spoke volumes. Behind me, the celebration continued, my absence like a small stone dropped in a pond, causing momentary ripples before the surface smoothed over again. Only Ryan had noticed me leave, his eyes meeting mine briefly as the elevator doors closed between us. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you don't make. The morning after the Henderson celebration dawned crisp and clear. I'd spent the night in my rarely used apartment downtown, a space I kept for late work nights but had never mentioned to Claire. As I dressed in my finest suit, not the modest attire of operations manager Josh, but the bespoke tailoring of CEO Joshua Reed, I felt a strange sense of calm. By 8:30 a.m., I was already in the executive boardroom on the top floor, reviewing documents with my CFO, Elaine, and legal counsel, Marcus. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, sliding the final papers across the polished mahogany table. "It's not too late to reconsider." "I've never been more certain," I replied, signing my name with a steady hand. Elaine studied me with concern. "And the personal aspects?" "Already in motion," I assured her. "The trust paperwork was filed last week." At precisely 8:55 a.m., the executive team began arriving, 8 men and women who believed they were meeting with the rarely seen CEO for an update on the Henderson acquisition. Their surprise at finding me already seated at the head of the table was evident in their confused glances. "Josh?" Victoria, our COO, asked hesitantly. "Are you taking minutes today?" I simply smiled. "Please take your seats. We'll begin shortly." At 9 a.m., Ryan arrived with a leather portfolio containing the Henderson materials. His eyes met mine briefly, a silent communication passing between us, before he took his position standing against the wall behind me. 2 minutes later, Claire walked in. She'd clearly dressed for what she thought was an important professional opportunity. A cream-colored blouse, tailored navy skirt, hair arranged in a sophisticated updo. Her eyes immediately sought Ryan, her face lighting up when she spotted him. The confidence in her stride faltered when she noticed me sitting at the head of the table. "Josh? What are you doing up there?" Her laugh held a note of confusion. "Shouldn't you be down in operations?" Before I could respond, the main doors opened once more. In walked Thomas Jacobson, the man everyone believed to be the CEO of Meridian Solutions, the figurehead I'd hired to make rare appearances at company functions and sign documents when necessary. "Mr. Reed?" Thomas nodded respectfully in my direction before taking a seat to my right. Claire's confusion deepened. She stood frozen near the doorway, her eyes darting between Thomas, the executives, and me. "Please close the door and take a seat, Claire," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd hidden from her for years. As she complied, visibly bewildered, I rose from my chair. "For those who don't know, and that's most of you, my name is Joshua Reed. Not Josh from operations, but Joshua Reed, founder and CEO of Meridian Solutions." The boardroom erupted into murmurs of shock. Victoria's mouth literally dropped open. Our VP of sales went pale. "Mr. Jacobson has been serving as the public face of leadership for several years, allowing me to work within the company without the constraints of title," I continued calmly. A strategy that has allowed me to truly understand our operations from the ground up and identify both our strengths and our vulnerabilities. Claire had gone completely still, her face draining of color as the implications dawned on her. "Ryan," I said, turning slightly, "would you please distribute the folders and explain what we've uncovered?" Ryan moved efficiently around the table, placing sealed red folders in front of each executive. "Over the past 3 weeks," he explained, "I've been conducting a confidential investigation at Mr. Reed's request. What we've discovered is that sensitive information about the Henderson acquisition has been deliberately leaked to competitors." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room before landing on our VP of Marketing, the same man who had made the toast last night. "The evidence is conclusive, Peter. The leaks originated from your department, through channels only you could access." Peter's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. You're just an intern." "Actually," Ryan replied coolly, "I have a master's in corporate security from Stanford and previously worked with the FBI's Corporate Crimes Division. The evidence has already been provided to our legal team." Marcus nodded grimly. "Security will escort you out, Peter. The authorities have been notified." As 2 security officers entered to remove a protesting Peter, I turned my attention back to the stunned room. Meridian Solutions was built on integrity and innovation. I expect nothing less from my leadership team. You'll find complete reorganization plans in your folders. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss implementation. I paused, letting my gaze finally settle on Claire, who looked as though she might collapse. Meeting adjourned. Except for you, Claire. And Ryan, please stay as well. As the executives filed out, many still glancing back at me in disbelief, Claire remained rooted to her chair, her hands trembling slightly. When the room had emptied save for the 3 of us, I finally spoke directly to her. "Let's begin," I said quietly. Then, holding her gaze, I added, "Nice of you to join us, Claire. Ryan reports directly to me. Always has." The silence that followed was deafening. "I don't understand," Claire whispered, her composure crumbling as the boardroom doors closed behind the last executive. Her eyes darted between Ryan and me, desperately searching for some explanation that would make sense of her new reality. "I think you do," I replied, my voice steady and calm, the voice of a CEO who had made countless difficult decisions. "You understand perfectly." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Should I give you 2 some privacy?" I shook my head. "Stay. You're part of this conversation." Claire's shock was morphing into something else, a frantic calculation visible in her eyes as she tried to reconcile the husband she'd dismissed with the powerful man before her. "How long?" she finally managed. "How long have you been this?" "I founded Meridian 7 years ago. Before we met. Before we..." Her voice faltered. "You've been lying to me our entire relationship? Our entire marriage?" "I never lied about who I am," I corrected her. "Just my title. And I initially kept it private for reasons that had nothing to do with you. After we met, the moment to tell you never seemed right." "The moment?" Claire's voice rose sharply. "There were thousands of moments, Josh. Years of moments. Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "Would knowing I was CEO instead of operations manager have made you respect me more as a person? Would it have stopped you from pursuing Ryan the moment you thought he had more ambition than me?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. "That's not fair. I didn't." "Please don't," Ryan interjected, his professionalism momentarily slipping. "I showed Mr. Reed the messages, Claire. And everyone saw your behavior at the party and the celebration last night." Claire's face flushed crimson. She stared down at her hands, now clasped tightly in her lap. "I didn't know," she stammered. "That's the point, Claire," I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. "You didn't need to know my title to treat me with basic respect. To not humiliate me in front of my colleagues. To not openly flirt with someone else while I stood right there." Tears welled in her eyes. "Josh, please. I've been unhappy, yes, but this... I never meant to. To get caught? I finished for her. Ryan cleared his throat. I should really step out for this part of the conversation. I nodded, and he quickly exited, closing the door softly behind him. Alone with Claire, I felt the weight of years of unspoken truths between us. Not just my secret identity, but the slow erosion of what we'd once shared. I've made arrangements, I said after a long silence. The penthouse downtown is yours if you want it. I've set up a trust that will ensure you're financially secure regardless of what happens between us. I'm not vindictive, Claire. I never have been. You're leaving me? Her voice was small, almost childlike in its disbelief. I think we left each other a long time ago, I replied gently. We just didn't admit it. But now that I know who you really are, what you've built, we could start over. I could support you properly. Be the wife you deserve. The desperation in her voice was painful to hear. I shook my head slowly. The wife I deserved wouldn't have needed to know my net worth to value me. Tears spilled down her cheeks, smudging her carefully applied makeup. I do value you, Josh. I've just been lost, confused about what I want. Please don't throw away 5 years over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, and we both know it. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. The separation papers are being delivered to the house this afternoon. I've moved my things to a new place. Take time to think about what you really want, Claire. Not who you want, but what. Because I don't think it was ever me. Josh, wait, she pleaded, reaching for my hand. I love you. I've always loved you. I paused, looking down at her fingers clutching mine, the same hands that had so casually dismissed everything about me until moments ago. I believe you think that's true, I said softly. But love includes respect, and that's been missing for a long time. I gently withdrew my hand and walked to the door. As I opened it, I turned back one last time. I'm not doing this to punish you, Claire. I'm doing it because we both deserve better than what we've become together. In the weeks that followed, Meridian Solutions underwent its planned reorganization. Ryan accepted a permanent position heading our new corporate security division. The Henderson acquisition proceeded smoothly, cementing our position in the market. Claire tried repeatedly to reconcile. Flowers to my office, heartfelt emails, even an attempted surprise visit to my new home. Each time, I responded with polite finality. Not out of hatred or revenge, but from the clear-eyed recognition that some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. The last time I saw her was 6 months later, at a charity gala downtown. She looked beautiful but fragile, watching me from across the room with eyes that finally saw me clearly. Too late. I nodded politely in her direction before turning back to my conversation, feeling neither triumph nor regret. Just the quiet certainty that sometimes, walking away silently is the loudest statement you can make.